Global Rescue throws you straight into the cold. You have fire trucks, ambulances, police cruisers, SWAT teams, and a city that won't wait for you to learn the ropes. The tutorial covers the basics, of course, but there is an entire layer of hidden mechanics below the surface that can completely change the way you play. So today, we're going to go over 10 hidden mechanics that Global Rescue doesn't explain to you. The kind of thing that separates a base that's barely surviving from one that runs like clockwork. I'm Matthew, and let's get into it. When a vehicle finishes a mission, it begins making the physical way back to the station, and it's very tempting to just let it return and wait. But you know what most people don't realize? You don't have to wait at all. While that ambulance or cruiser is in the middle of its return trip, you could open the map, click on it, and redirect it directly to a new call. The vehicle changes route instantly without needing to touch the base first. It's one of those things the game never explains directly, but it makes an absurd difference in your operational efficiency once you start using it. The impact of this goes beyond just saving time. You are cutting unnecessary travel, reducing fleet fuel consumption, and keeping your coverage active during high-demand situations when multiple calls appear at the same time. In games of this genre, this idle time between missions is usually a silent bottleneck that sinks your score without you even noticing. So, the next time a vehicle concludes a mission and you see a new call popping up on the map, don't wait for it to reach the station. Redirect it immediately. Your vehicles don't need rest, and every second they spend traveling without a purpose is a second you could be saving someone. Look, I'll be honest with you. When I started playing Global Rescue, I made the same mistake almost every new player makes. I saw those flashy helicopters and heavy rescue trucks in the shop and thought, yes, I need that now. Spoiler, it was a terrible idea, and my economy sank faster than a rookie paramedic on their first shift. The thing is, no one tells you right away. The research tree is silently the most powerful system in the entire game. Before you even think about expanding your fleet, you need to be putting your resources into those initial research nodes. It might not seem exciting at first. There are no cool vehicles to show off, but what it does behind the scenes is huge. We're talking about fuel efficiency, reduced maintenance, more fleet slots, staff upgrades, and area expansions that lower your invisible operational costs. These are exactly the things that keep your economy breathing when the campaigns start getting heavy. The reason this feels like a hidden mechanic is that the game never screams at you to prioritize it. The tree sits there in the menu looking optional, while the vehicle shop is in your face looking absolutely necessary. But here's the truth. Buying expensive vehicles early without research upgrades is like hiring an entire fire department and forgetting to pay the electricity bill. Everything stalls, and suddenly you're stuck in a spiral where you can't pay for repairs, can't expand your area, and missions start to fail because your fleet is performing below expectations. Do yourself a favor. In the first few hours of any new campaign, ignore the vehicle shop. Maximize those early researches first. You will unlock larger fleet limits naturally, and when you do start buying real vehicles, your entire operation will run at a level that players who skip research simply cannot reach. Trust me, your future self will be very grateful for this tip. If you are playing and suddenly a mission freezes, an NPC starts doing something completely nonsensical on the real map, or things just seem broken, there is something built directly into the game that most players have no idea exists. Press F1. That's it. This key opens the dynamic bug report system, and what it does under the hood is incredibly smart. It doesn't just flag a problem, it automatically packages your save file and the log files from that exact moment of the bug, and sends everything directly to the developers. No need to dig through folders, no copying and pasting cryptic error messages. The game does all the heavy lifting for you. What makes this genuinely useful, especially in early access, is the precision. Since the logs are captured exactly at the moment the bug happens, the development team gets a clear view of what went wrong in your specific campaign, on your specific map state. This kind of data is gold for a small team trying to push out fixes fast. You're not just complaining about a problem, you're handing them the tools to actually solve it. So the next time something feels off in the middle of a mission, don't just reload and move on. Press F1 first, you'll be helping yourself in the long run, because the faster the devs can identify and fix the issues in your campaign, the smoother your experience will be. It's one of those features that silently makes early access feel less like a gamble and more like a collaboration. If you're noticing that your employees are taking longer to respond, or that your base efficiency is dropping for no apparent reason, the fault is probably in the layout. There is a mechanic the game barely explains, and it makes a huge difference in your staff's performance. Your employees' AI works based on physical proximity. This means they need quick access to specific areas of the base to maintain their rhythm. And the two most important ones are the kitchen and the bathroom. Without them configured correctly, you'll see that efficiency drop appear out of nowhere, and you'll be scratching your head trying to figure out what's wrong. For the kitchen, the minimum size that works well is around 4x4 meters, but I recommend going for 5x5 or even 6x4 if you have the space. The crucial point here is to have a refrigerator installed. Without it, the room doesn't count as a functional kitchen for the AI. As for the bathroom, it needs to be at least 3x3 meters, and pay attention, it needs to have operational showers. It's no use building the room and leaving the showers out, thinking it's just an aesthetic detail. What really matters in this mechanic isn't just the size, but the combination of proximity and correct equipment. If your base is large, consider having more than one of these areas distributed across the floors so that no employee has to travel a long distance to reach them. When you strike this balance, efficiency visibly rises and your rescue operations flow much better. You know that moment when you think you're doing well, everything is under control, and suddenly New Year's Eve arrives in the game and your screen explodes with calls all at once? Yeah, that was exactly the moment I realized I was playing Global Rescue completely wrong. I used to send every available unit to any call that appeared, thinking that responding quickly was enough. It wasn't. The problem is that the game doesn't perform automatic triage for you. When an ATM explosion and a traffic dispute appear on your screen at the same time, the system doesn't separate the severe from the trivial. That decision is entirely yours. And if you send your best ambulances to a simple street fight, you'll be left with no resources available when that high-scoring major incident needs an immediate response. The penalty for failing a critical call can ruin an entire campaign that was going well. New Year's Eve is the most brutal test of this because calls come in waves. The strategy that works is intentionally holding some units on standby, even if it feels strange to leave resources idle. You need to read the calls before dispatching, identify which ones have higher severity and points, and only then distribute your units surgically. Smaller calls can wait a few seconds. Explosions and incidents with serious victims cannot. It's a classic mechanic of the emergency simulation genre, but Global Rescue applies it in a way that catches many people off guard because the game doesn't explicitly warn you. Once you internalize this manual prioritization logic, the way you read the map changes completely. You stop reacting and start managing, and that difference is reflected directly in your score and the financial health of your operation. I spent hours wondering why my progression was so slow compared to what I expected. I sent the cruisers, resolved the calls, everything seemed fine, but the XP just wasn't coming in the amounts it should have. It was only after a lot of poking around that I discovered I was leaving precious points on the table in every police mission I completed. The game doesn't tell you, but resolving the immediate danger in a police call is only half the job. When your officers arrive on the scene and control the situation, the mission isn't actually complete yet. You need to manually click on the agents on site to interrogate witnesses and analyze the perimeter. These extra interactions are what unlock the maximum XP for the mission. Without them, you are essentially completing the mission in basic mode and ignoring the entire layer of progression that comes afterward. The impact of this on your progression is bigger than it looks. XP means levels, and levels mean research points, which are the central gear for everything you want to unlock in the game. If you are doing this in every police mission without taking advantage of the interrogation and perimeter analysis, you are leveling up at a considerably slower speed than you could be. Over time, this difference builds up in a way that you feel in your access to improvements. So now, every time a cruiser resolves a call, I don't take my eyes off the screen. As soon as the situation is controlled, I click on the officers and do the full process before releasing the unit. It's a small habit that completely changes the pace of your progression, and once you start doing this consistently, the difference in your level and your research points appears fast. This is one of those tips that seems obvious after you discover it, but the game never explains it to you directly. For a long time, I thought my employees were recovering normally between shifts, and that lounges with sofas and chairs were enough to keep the staff in shape. I was completely wrong, and I felt it firsthand when a spike in calls hit and half my team was operating with energy at rock bottom. What happens is that your employees recover energy, hunger, hygiene, and other needs automatically when they are at the base. But the speed of this recovery depends heavily on what you have built for them. Sofas and chairs do the job, but in such a slow way that in practice your employees return to calls still tired. Beds completely change this equation. Energy recovery with beds is visibly faster, and this difference becomes critical exactly when you need the entire team operational. The moment this matters most is during call spikes, which is precisely when you cannot afford to have staff in slow recovery. Imagine a major event arriving, several simultaneous calls, and your best employees still recovering on a sofa because their room doesn't have beds. You will send fatigued personnel to important missions, and fatigue directly affects response efficiency. It's a bad cycle that starts long before the peak itself. The solution is simple but requires base planning from early on. Replace basic lounges with bedrooms with beds as soon as you have the resources, and position these rooms close to the operations areas so that the trip to rest is quick. When the next big event appears in the game, you will immediately notice that your team is returning to calls much faster and with full response capacity. Man, this is one of those mechanics that the game doesn't throw in your face, but it completely changes your performance once you notice it. In Global Rescue, it's no use dispatching units on impulse, thinking that any team can solve everything. Many missions are designed specifically to test you on this, asking for a specific combination of services, and if you don't pay attention to this right away, the game punishes you mercilessly in the final evaluation. The most common mistake here is sending only what seems obvious at first glance. Like, you see an incident and think, okay, this is a job for the fire department, and you only send them. But then, in the middle of the mission, an unexpected need arises. Identification, civilian control, medical support, and just like that, you've already lost time and efficiency. And in this game, time and the right decision make a huge difference in your grade. A classic example is the case of the dog stuck in a hot car. Many people just send a direct rescue, but the game expects you to think beyond that. The police go in to identify the owner and handle a legal situation, while other units handle the rescue itself. When you start anticipating these combinations, the game practically becomes a different one because you stop reacting and start acting strategically. So the right way to play here is simple but requires discipline. Always take a look at the mission details before sending anything. If you have any doubt, just send a mixed team. It might seem like overkill at first, but in practice, this avoids rework, saves time, and guarantees much better evaluations. Once you get into this habit, it's hard to go back to doing things on autopilot. It took me a long time to understand why some regions of the map always seemed problematic, even with well-positioned stations. Response times in those areas were consistently bad, and I kept attributing it to traffic or the size of the map. It was only when I started thinking about overlapping coverage that it really clicked. Each station with applied upgrades generates a response ring around it. And the secret lies in positioning your stations so that these rings overlap at critical points on the map. Bridges, industrial areas, and traffic bottlenecks are exactly the places where calls appear most frequently and where response time matters most. If you have only one station covering these areas without overlap, any call that arrives while that unit is occupied automatically becomes dead time. EMS is where this strategy makes the most difference because medical calls are the ones that suffer most from delay. An ambulance stuck on a call on the other side of the map while a serious emergency appears in the industrial area is exactly the kind of situation that this layered coverage prevents. With two stations overlapping in a critical region, you always have a backup unit available without having to seek reinforcements from far away. When you start planning your map, thinking about coverage rings instead of just distributing stations across the available space, the entire operation gains a different fluidity. Dead times disappear, your response grades go up, and you stop constantly putting out fires because the system is working intelligently for you before problems happen. One thing the game doesn't make clear right away is how much fatigue can destroy your operation without you noticing. At first, it seems like you can keep the same team responding to everything because they can still handle it. But gradually, you start to feel that something is off. Responses get slower, mistakes increase, and you don't always understand why. It's fatigue accumulating behind the scenes. The trick here is to think like a real rescue coordinator. You can't depend on a single team all the time. Always try to keep at least one team resting while another is in the field. This creates a constant flow of response without that critical moment where everyone is tired at the same time. Because when that happens, chaos comes fast. One thing that worked really well for me was working with fixed pairs and alternating them. While one pair resolves occurrences, the other stays on standby, recovering energy. As soon as the first starts losing performance, I make the switch. This avoids that domino effect where everyone gets exhausted together and no mission goes right. If you ignore this, the game continues, but it becomes much harder than it should be. Now, when you master this rotation, everything flows better. Faster responses, fewer failures, and much more control over the situation. It's that kind of silent mechanic that, once you understand it, completely changes the way you play.